The wind spoke in dry tongues across the plains, whispering secrets to the tall grass and warning those who listened. But most in the camp were too busy to hear. Horses whinnied under heavy loads, children stumbled under bundles twice their size, and the elderly leaned on whatever limbs hadn't yet betrayed them. The tribe was preparing to move again, not for a few days, not for a few miles, but for the long crossing. The one that carved miles into bones and took its price from the slow. Ghost Elk stood on the edge of the encampment, watching the same struggle play out for the fourth time in his 23 winters. The old woman named Red Moon bent low to lift a bundle she had no business carrying. Her grandsons were already ahead, lashing meat to horses and sharpening tools. She wouldn't ask for help. She never did. But Ghost Elk couldn't unsee the last crossing when 2 elders and a child named Turtle Sky were left behind in a sudden storm. They said it was no one's fault. But Ghost Elk had heard their cries through the wind. He still heard them. That night, while the fires dimmed and the camp slept, he crept to the edge of the pony line. He brought with him only what the buffalo had given: 2 long poles of stripped ash wood, antler carved into hooks, sinew soaked in water, and a flat cross frame woven from rawhide. He bound them together slowly, remembering how elk antlers split outward wide at the base, angled for balance. The idea had come to him during a hunt when a downed elk slid over snow without resistance. He remembered dragging the carcass behind him on a sledge of broken branches, the way it had seemed to glide like it wanted to move. Now he built that memory in wood and hide. The structure looked like madness. A tangled frame of poles and cross-lashing, no wheels, no elegance, just stubborn reach and low drag. But it could carry weight. That was the only law that mattered on the long walk. By morning, Ghost Elk was already pulling the thing through the grass. At first, only a few children noticed, then a hunter, then a mother with a baby tied to her back, struggling to keep a sack of winter furs on her shoulder. She watched as Ghost Elk loaded stones, firewood, even his own bedroll onto the sled, then dragged it forward without complaint. He didn't boast. He didn't speak. He only moved. Later that day, she approached him with quiet urgency. Her husband's horse was injured. Her son could barely walk. Could she try the frame? Ghost Elk only nodded. By dusk, the Invention had moved further than any single pack horse. By nightfall, it carried not just weight, but whispers. By the second morning, the thing had a name: Ghost Elk's Mistake. It was said with grins and headshakes, passed between warriors as they saddled their mounts and lashed tighter knots. One elder joked it looked like a broken spider. Another called it a dragging funeral pole. Even Ghost Elk's brother, Red Hawk a Pack, sharp-eyed hunter with 2 coups to his name, leaned close that morning and muttered, "Maybe next time. Just walk." But Ghost Elk didn't answer. He was already bent at the lashings, adjusting the balance, retying the rawhide where it had frayed from stone scrape. Beside him, the mother who'd borrowed it the day before lifted her sick child into the hide sling without a word. He looked up at her, and in her silence, he saw something the others hadn't. Her child wasn't coughing anymore. The camp moved out in staggered waves. As usual, the strongest led. Warriors on horseback with bows across their backs and small packs hanging from their saddles. Behind them came the families, the elderly, the slow. Ghost Elk walked somewhere in the middle, the long poles of his frame trailing behind him like a set of antlers grown from his spine. He had added another lash point overnight, a flat section that now held 3 bundles of meat, 2 water skins, and a small wooden bowl, carved by his late father. The sled the travois, as he had begun calling it, bore it all with ease. Then the ground turned rough. The plains dipped into cracked dirt, gopher holes, and exposed rock. Horses stumbled, packs shifted, swearing filled the air. A woman's saddlebag tore, spilling dry meat into the dust. 2 warriors dismounted to help. Ghost Elk kept walking. His travois glided over it all, poles flexing like the legs of an animal built for rough land. A boy riding bareback on a pony pulled up beside him, eyes wide. "Does it work on snow?" Ghost Elk shrugged. "I think so." "Did you see this in a dream?" "No, I saw it in a mistake." The boy furrowed his brow and galloped off. That night, campfires burned low again. Ghost Elk sat alone beside his invention, inspecting the frame. He had reinforced the crossbars with small bone wedges to reduce strain, learning from the small cracks that had begun to appear near the joints. As he worked, Red Hawk approached. His tone was quiet, but not mocking this time. "You going to build more?" "Maybe," Ghost Elk said, not looking up. Red Hawk hesitated. "One of the elders saw you haul 2 old ones uphill faster than 4 horses. She said it was like watching a wind spirit carry them." Ghost Elk finally glanced at him. Red Hawk grinned. "Still looks like a broken spider, though." Then he walked away. But not before Ghost Elk noticed he was dragging a bundle of branches behind him, shaped like poles, cut to equal length. The wind arrived like a whisper from the north, strange, sharp, and early. It was still 4 suns before the tribe expected snowfall, but the sky darkened in the west by mid-afternoon, and the horses grew restless. Ghost Elk tasted the air and knew. The birds had gone silent. The clouds were too low. Snow was coming, not the soft kind, but the kind that swallowed footsteps and made fire feel like a lie. The warning cry came just before dusk. Storm. Wind. The column of travelers shattered into motion. Warriors doubled back to gather stragglers. Families dropped whatever wasn't tied to their backs. Old ones clung to younger shoulders as white began to fall from the sky like ash from a cracked sky bowl. Ghost Elk didn't panic. He bent to the travois and pulled tight every knot. His mare, Singing Wind, whinnied once, sensing urgency, but trusting the balance of the load behind her. On the frame, he strapped not just food and hides, but something heavier, a fevered boy, wrapped in buffalo fur, and beside him an elder named Fire Voice, whose legs had failed him seasons ago. Most had abandoned weight. Ghost Elk carried life. The snow turned sideways within the hour. Wind cut across the land so fierce it peeled bark from trees and sanded the breath from open mouths. Visibility shrank to nothing. Warriors circled back, shouting names into the white silence, finding no answers. Ghost Elk moved steadily, slowly. His mare picked the path, and the travois followed like a second spine sliding clean over the snow instead of sinking. The narrow runners, the sloped platform, the flexibility of lashed poles, all designed for drag and glide, now moved like they had been shaped by the blizzard itself. Behind him, another horse stumbled. Its rider, a young woman named River Ash, cried out, trying to drag her mother to shelter. Ghost Elk turned without a word, adjusted the load, and made room. They tied the old woman beside Fire Voice. He handed River Ash his father's bowl, filled with warm pemmican from a pouch at his hip. They moved on, a small island of motion in a sea of white. By moonrise, though no moon could be seen, Ghost Elk crested a low ridge. There, half buried in snow, lay a circle of stone, long abandoned by buffalo hunters. He called out once, and River Ash echoed. They began digging, clearing enough space for a windbreak, a small fire, and room for the sick. When the fire cracked to life, it was like hearing the earth breathe again. All night, Ghost Elk sat awake, adding wood to the flame, checking pulses, adjusting blankets. The travois rested behind him, snow-cloaked but upright, not a tool anymore, but a witness. Come morning, the snow had calmed. In the distance, riders emerged like ghosts from the storm. They saw the fire, they saw the sled, they saw the lives it carried. They did not call it foolish anymore. When the storm passed, it left the land silent. Snow lay waist-deep in places, covering trails, caches, and old instincts. For 3 days the camp stayed still, not out of fear, but reverence. Those who had survived began to speak not of the cold, but of how they survived. They spoke of a sled made of poles and sinew. They spoke of a quiet man and a patient horse. They spoke of lives carried instead of left behind. By the time the migration resumed, the travois had a name in every mouth: Elk Trail. Some said it was because the poles curved like antlers. Others whispered that Ghost Elk's spirit had guided them through the storm like an elk through the trees, always one step ahead of death. Either way, the name stuck, and then it spread. The next to build one was Red Hawk, and his came with additions: wider crossbars, thicker bindings. He used cured hide from an old bull buffalo, which gave it both flexibility and strength. A medicine woman saw it and asked for one to carry her herbs and mortar stones. A young scout made a smaller one for his dog to pull. One child even strapped a bow to a miniature frame and dragged her baby brother around the fire circle until he laughed again for the first time in days. The design shifted, improved, but its soul remained. Ghost Elk said nothing of the invention. He never claimed it. He simply built more. Sometimes alone, sometimes with others watching. He didn't mind. Every pair of hands that learned to lash poles together meant fewer people left behind when the snows came. Night. As the stars returned to the sky and the land thawed just enough for fire pits to bite into earth again, the elders gathered in a wide ring. In the center sat the original travois, battered now, its bindings weathered, its runners scraped raw from ice and stone. But it still stood. They lit a fire beside it and placed their hands upon the wood in silence. Then the elder named Bitter Willow spoke. "This," she said, "was called foolish. This was laughed at. But it carried my sister through the storm. It carried Fire Voice when his legs no longer could. It carried a child who now laughs again." She paused. "And it carried us into the next season." The others nodded. A small boy crawled under the travois and whispered, "It smells like smoke and bone." Someone laughed. Then someone else cried. By spring, every family had at least one. They began marking their travois with ochre, beads, and feathers. Not for beauty, for memory. Every lash of hide became a story. Every pole was named. Some tribes that passed through took the design with them. Within moons, the elk trail appeared in valleys far beyond Ghost Elk's camp, built by hands he would never meet. And still, he built more. Years passed like wind through grass, felt more than seen. Ghost Elk grew older, though not in the way others did. His body still bent to tie sinew knots. His legs still walked the ridgelines, still listened to snow before it fell. But his voice grew quieter, even when silence wasn't required. He watched the young ones tie poles wrong, then right. He watched them fail, then try again. He never corrected them unless they asked, and they always asked eventually. By then, the elk trail was everywhere. It moved with the tribes, across rivers and valleys and high ridges where wheels would snap and hooves would sink. It carried mothers in childbirth and warriors wounded in ambush. It hauled bison meat, water drums, sacred drums, even the bones of ancestors when burial grounds had to be left behind. Some said the travois had always existed, that it was a gift from the animals, not a man. Ghost Elk never argued. He didn't want to be remembered as the maker. Only the reminder. The one who looked at a broken crossing and said, "Never again." One winter, long after the great blizzard, a young boy named Gray Tooth was born early, sickly, and quiet. The healer said he might not make it. The snow was too deep for horses, and the medicine routes were still a 2-day walk away. No one knew what to do, except Ghost Elk. He lashed together 2 poles from an old cedar he'd been saving. He used deer guts soaked in river ash, tied tight over a pelt-lined frame, and fastened a hood above the sling to shield the infant from wind. Then he looked to River Ash, the mother who had once huddled behind his fire with frostbitten hands and no words. "I will go with you," she said, before he could speak. They left that night. The travois cut through moonlit snow, like a memory through silence. 2 days later, they returned. Gray Tooth opened his eyes the moment he touched the smoke-warmed hide of the lodge. He survived. The story was told, and told again. And Ghost Elk, now gray-haired and slower in his steps, sat by the fire as children played with miniature travois near the lodge walls. One boy dragged his behind him with a feather tied to the crossbeam. Another girl placed a clay figure inside hers and sang to it in a language older than words. The old man smiled. He thought of the first frame, rough, ugly, lashed in darkness. He thought of the snow that swallowed footprints and the stone shelter that gave them back. He thought of Fire Voice, of Red Moon, of the mother who first asked, "Can I try it?" And he thought of what was carried not just weight, but life. The travois would be improved, changed, forgotten, then rediscovered. but something sacred would remain. Because across the plains, beyond the wind, memory still had a shape, and it moved on two poles, dragged by those who refused to leave anyone behind.